Hello and welcome to the channel. So today's video topic was voted on by our YouTube subscribers, which is covering tactics for using the stratagems within the Necron Codex. So we did a Necron flash poll and it had 41% of the vote. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Before we get into that, the shout out of today is going to Brew and Biscuits. They're loving the army builds that we're doing on the channel. So if you also wanted to get involved in the voting process we do on the channel, then simply subscribe below and keep your eyes open on the YouTube homepage, or alternatively go to the community tab within the Planet 40k YouTube homepage to find all the latest polls. Now we usually do flash polls, which are 24-hour polls, and it will dictate what the next video will be. So today we're going through the stratagems as mentioned. Within the Necron Codex there's 40 in total, but we won't be touching the Dynasty specific stratagems as they will already have been covered in our Dynasty tactic video. So if you've not seen any of those, go check them out. They'll be in the Necron playlist on the channel. So that just leaves 34 stratagems in total. So I'm going to be doing them in order based upon the turn that is played out, i.e. the command phase stratagems will be first, then the movement phase and so on. And of course any stratagems that are used pre-game as well, they'll be done before all of those. Now some of the stratagems may not really need much going over, but we will stop and go over some of them in a little bit more detail. So let's kick things off with the pre-game stratagems. The first one being the Dynastic Heirlooms, which is 1 command point. So when your Warlord has got the Necron keyword, which he should have, then one of your Necron characters, excluding Catan shards and named characters, can be given a relic. Now obviously your army already has one relic for free within your list build, but this will be an additional relic. And it can't be a duplicate relic that you've already got. And also you can't be putting 2 relics on one single model. Now you're using this stratagem only once, and if you're playing a Strike Force mission, then you can actually use the stratagem twice, or if you're playing Onslaught, then you can use it 3 times. So this doesn't really need much discussion, you're simply using it to get more relics in the list. The most notable relics that people tend to be adding are the Veil of Darkness relic, which is really good for an Overlord or a Chronomancer in particular, for moving warriors and Lich Guard to any part of the battle, almost an auto include for me, that one. Then the Orb of Eternity relic is sometimes an option, not quite an auto include, but if you are warrior heavy within your list, it's pretty valuable. The Voltaic Staff is another solid relic to replace your Staff of Light for your Overlord, and it's a pretty good anti-infantry remover, especially when you hit on 2s and 6s explode with your Overlords. Then the last one I wanted to mention is just one of my personal favourites. It's from the Mefrit Code, used with a Royal Warden. It's the Conduit of Stars relic, and it will give him 36 inches, which will go to 39 inches due to the actual Dynasty buffs, which will mean he's going to be rapid firing at 20 inches. And that's the main relics I like to use. Now we're going to be covering the relics in a later video. So next we've got the Hand of the Pharaon. This is 2 command points. Again, it's a pre-battle stratagem to use. If you don't have the Pharaon keyword within your army, you then select one Necron's Overlord model. Then that Overlord will be gaining that Pharaon keyword, which effectively lets you use your Mind Will Be Done ability twice instead of the once. But you can only use this stratagem once. So another one I really like to make use of, as you may have seen in a couple of our list build videos that we've recently done, letting core units hit on 2s instead of 3s could be really big. Could be using it on an Overlord on foot with 2 sets of warrior blobs, or maybe 2 sets of immortals or Lich Guard, or alternatively you could put it on a command barge because they've also got the Overlord keyword, and then it could be tailing 2 max units of Tomb Blades. It's quite easy to forget that those flying bikes are also core. If I am fielding an Overlord, then I'm most definitely going to be taking core units too, so it's almost an auto include to take this one as well, especially if you've got an unnamed Overlord. If you're not fielding core units, then you don't really need to be taking an Overlord model anyway. So next we've got Rarefied Nobility. It's 1 command point. It's basically getting an additional Warlord trait within your list on a separate character model, non-named character of course, and it won't be used on a Catan shard again because they never get anything really. Now I personally don't really rate our Warlord traits, comparing them to other factions. However, there are a few potentials in there that you could use with the right combination. For example, putting Implacable Conqueror on an Overlord carrying a Veil of Darkness relic, then taking a unit of Lich Guard could hold massive value. But you could also use it on a Chronomancer, which also grants the in-1 save. So your call on that one which you take. Other people tend to go for the Thrall of the Silent King Warlord trait, which adds a 3 inches to the aura abilities, as well as the Mind Will Be Done and the Lord's Will, and the Adaptive Strategy abilities. Now if you're looking at the dynastic specific traits, there's a couple of good ones in there. Again, I won't go into too much detail because it's a separate video for those. The Sautek and the Zerakan traits are very good value if you're playing either of those dynasties. The Sautek one giving you CP back on a 5+ every time you use a command point, and the Zerakan one, which is the Triarch's Will, allows you to ditch one of your protocols and then use another one twice, so you can select the one that you really like. Okay, moving on to the stratagems that you're going to be using within the command phase. You've got Ring Constitutional Protocols for 1 command point, used for your Ghost Arc, and effectively when you're using your Repair Barge ability, instead of setting up the 3 warriors back, you're going to be setting up the 6 warriors back. Now I personally love the Ghost Arcs. I think they're the most underrated unit within our codex. If you think about it, it has the same firepower as 10 warriors carrying flayers, and the 10 warriors cost 130 points. Now the Ghost Arc is only 15 points more, but with all the added tankiness and the quantum shielding, and only really needs to bring back a single model to virtually break even on your points. Let alone bringing D3 back every single turn, and with the stratagem it's D6. The stratagem in my opinion is probably better than the Resurrection Orb. Let's say you got a full unit of 20 warriors and 14 die, that's around about the time where you want to be popping the Resurrection Orb. So you're going to be rolling 14 dice with that orb, and on average you're going to get around 5 back up after re-rolling those ones, of course. That's not too bad, but this stratagem averages about 4, and you can be using it every single turn, not just the once. So I need more Ghost Arcs. Okay, the next one, Stellar Alignment Protocol. It's either 1 or 2 command points, depending on whether you got the Titanic keyword or not. You're selecting a vehicle that has got a wounds characteristic of 10 or more wounds, and effectively they're going to have the full wounds remaining for the purposes of their characteristics within the profile. So you're not going to be bracketed, so it's not going to affect your ballistic skill or your movement, for example. Now we don't have tons of vehicles with 10 wounds or more. The Triarch Stalker, the Doomsday Arc, the Ghost Arc, the 2 Flyers, then of course all the Lord of War models. The Silent King, however, is an interesting one to use, as he would technically gain his Staff of Stars and Scythe of Dust weapons back, and also gain the 2 abilities back, which are the Fairing of the Stars and the Fairing of the Blades. So if I was using the Silent King, I'd be using that stratagem every turn if he was bracketed, but I'd also be trying to heal him as often as I could too with the Canoptic Spider with a Claw Array, and don't forget he's got Living Metal. Aside from the Silent King, the Doom Scythe and the Doomsday Arc need to be firing at full ballistic skill, otherwise they're pretty much pointless, especially when you've got a random amount of attacks. As for the Triarch Stalker, it's more about the targeting relay, so we just need to make a single hit there, so I'd really be taking the Particle Shredder or the Twin Heavy Gorse Cannon, which almost ensures you hit every time due to the amount of shots you have anyway, so I wouldn't be really using it on him. Next you've got Strange Echoes, which is 1 command point. Using the command phase on a Catan Shard model, you select one of the powers of the Catan that it doesn't know, so it's a straight up swap for your Catan power. Now I'd only really use this if your Catan Shard gets close enough to not need the long distance powers anymore, and instead could opt for the Cosmic Fire power, which is only a 9-inch range, but it hits everything within that 9-inch bubble on a 4+ for D3 wounds. To be honest, all the powers are pretty beefy, so I'd be happy with any of the ones I got, but for 1 command point it's not a bad option to have. Next you've got Deathless Arise, which is 1 command point, used on a Technomancer model. Until the end of the phase, the model can use its Rites of Reanimation ability an additional time. Now I'm not going to lie, I almost forgot we had this stratagem, which is really stupid because I play lists that involve a buttload of warriors with Technomancers and Ghost Arc, so I'm quite glad I've done this video to remind me that we've got this to be bringing D3 more warriors back every turn, which is just nice really, isn't it? Probably not worth using on an immortal unit, only getting the single model back. Okay, moving on to the stratagems that happen in the movement phase. You've got the Burrowing Nightmares, which is 1 command point. So you're selecting a Ophidian Destroyer unit that is within the battlefield, and you can remove them, and in the next reinforcement step on your next movement phase, you can re-deep strike them anywhere more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So as I mentioned, it's pretty much a re-deep strike. Now I say deep strike, apologies, this is old terminology. Bringing units in from reinforcements is the proper term, although I'm sure you will know what I mean by that. The issue I have with this stratagem is they miss an entire turn. Now there's only 5 turns here, but I do understand that sometimes they're miles out of position, and it's much quicker to use this. It also ensures they're not going to get shot off the board in the process, as they're quite lightweight, so it's not too bad. Next you've got Dimensional Corridor for 1 command point. Using the movement phase, you're selecting a core unit, which is an infantry unit that is on the battlefield, and you're going to remove it from play, and in the reinforcement step of the same movement phase you can bring them back anywhere within 3 inches of a Dynasty monolith model. So this one's a little bit better than the previous one because it happens in the same movement phase, so no go into the sidelines for a turn. So this is a good method of getting Lichguard or warriors up close using the monolith's own deep strike ability. So you deep strike your monolith in, then for 1 command point you spring your core unit out from one place to another. It's just a shame that the monolith costs so much, and it's a Lord of War model, so it is going to cost you an extra detachment as well, although this has recently been made cheaper on the CP. Now I do plan on using the monolith a little bit more, as I do love the model. I just wish it was in the heavy sports section, but in honesty a Veil of Darkness relic on a Chronomancer is just cheaper. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is the Prismatic Dimensional Breach. 1 command point again. Using the reinforcement step of the movement phase, you're selecting a core unit that is in strategic reserves, and then you select a Night Scythe or a monolith that is within the battlefield, and then you can set that core unit up on the battlefield wholly within 3 inches of that Night Scythe or monolith, but you can't go into engagement range of any enemy units, and it also cannot be used in the first battle round. So at first you think, I've paid for my unit to be in reserves anyway, so coming in from the side of the board isn't that bad. But there is a little trick to this one. You get a Night Scythe, fly it wherever you want on turn 2, use the stratagem and get a unit of Lichguard out of reserves. Now 2 things you may have noticed here. Firstly, there's no 9-inch restriction to make you stay away from enemy models. It just says that you can't get an engagement range of enemy models, so these guys can be in combat in the same turn. And 2, usually you can't disembark from a transport after it's moved. Now this isn't technically disembarking, so you can actually get out of the transport and make the charge in that same move rather than sitting around in a flyer waiting for your next turn. And then furthermore, like I mentioned, there's no risky 9-inch charge either, so you're not going to need a Chronomancer for the reroll to the charge roll. Now the only downside to this is you can't buff the unit with the My Will Be Done ability while in reserves, because this happens on the battlefield within the command phase. Next you've got the Dimensional Destabilization Stratagem for 1 or 2 command points, again depending on that Titanic keyword. You're going to get a Catan Shard model and you're going to roll on the table for the powers with a d6, and whenever you roll you're going to be able to use that power for that turn. So if you are taking a Catan Shard, I'd be using this almost every turn. Catan powers are very strong, especially when your opponents are using more elite factions. And you've already paid the points to fill that Catan Shard, so you may as well be making the most out of those powers, causing mortal wounds. Okay, stay with the movement phase, but this is your opponent's movement phase. It's the Etheric Interception. It's 1 command point. You're going to be using it on a Hyperspace Hunter unit, so that will be your Death Marks and your Hexmark Destroyer. So use this stratagem in your opponent's reinforcement step of their movement phase. When they're setting up a unit on the battlefield, you're going to select a Hyperspace Hunter unit that is either on the battlefield or in the hyperspace dimension, effectively strategic reserves. Then if that hyperspace hunter unit is in strategic reserves, you can also set them up on the battlefield within 18 inches of that enemy unit being set up, but more than 9 inches away from enemy models. And that unit can then shoot as if it was their shooting phase, but it can only target the enemy unit that was set up on the battlefield that turn. And they've also got to be eligible to be a target of the attack. So I'm not really sure how I feel about this one. It's only valid to the Death Mark units and Hex Mark units as mentioned. Now you can keep your Death Marks in strategic reserves to guarantee they'll be within 18 inches of the opponent's unit that are coming in. But then they're going to be missing turn 1, potentially turn 2 or turn 3, depending on what turn your opponent brings the model in. Okay, they're going to be catching up one of those said turns because it's going to be fired in your opponent's turn. But the Death Marks have a 36-inch range, 39 if you're using the metric code, and need to be shooting every single turn and at characters on the board. Also, if they come in from reserves, then they technically have moved, so it's going to be a -1 to hit penalty, meaning they're going to be hitting on 3s. And then as for the Hexmark Destroyers, for the majority they kinda suck. Maybe good against toughness 3 units with a poor armor save, but more elite armies I wouldn't even bother. Okay, moving into the shooting phase for the stratagems, you've got the Atavistic Instigation, which is 1 command point used on a Doom Scythe model from your army that is selected to shoot. Now after you've selected your target, using the Heavy Death Ray, you select an enemy unit within 3 inches of the target, or you can actually select the target as well if you wished. Then the enemy unit has the option of either bracing or ducking for cover. Now, if they're a vehicle or a monster, then the bracing isn't going to actually have any effect, but if they're not, then they're going to suffer D3 mortal wounds. And if they duck for cover, then until the end of the turn, you subtract 1 from the attack characteristics of the models in the unit, and they cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend. Now, I'm not a fan of this one either, if I'm honest. It's just bad. It's allowing your opponent to choose rather than force their hand. If it forced no Overwatch, then maybe it's okay, but your opponent that wants to Overwatch will just simply select to take the mortal wounds. Next, we've got Disintegration Capacitors for 1 command point, using the shooting phase on a Necron unit that's going to be firing Gauss weapons. Any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will auto wound the target. Now this one's great on a max unit of warriors or a max unit of tomb blades. Now a max unit of warriors is going to have 40 shots and average around 7 6s, which will now be auto wounding. As for the max unit of tomb blades with the 36 Gauss shots, that's going to average around 6 auto wounding shots. The slight issue I have is yes, you skip the wound roll, which is nice, but you did have a fair shot at wounding with those dice anyway, unless of course you're targeting something with a really high toughness, but those units tend to be stacked with wounds, and the Gauss weapons are only 1 damage each. The bigger and badder Gauss weapons don't really have enough shots to warrant using the stratagem. Okay, on to the next one, which is the Extermination Protocols. It's now 2 command points, using it on a Locust Destroyer or a Locust Heavy Destroyer unit. When they're selected to shoot, you're going to be able to reroll the wound rolls. Now, only useful when you've got a max unit of destroyers to make the most out of the benefits, as putting it on a single heavy destroyer isn't that great, and it's 2 command points, so it's a little bit too expensive for that. Now having a destroyer lord allows you to reroll 1s anyway, which is sometimes all you need, but we do tend to struggle getting those destroyer lords into a list because they lack the global keyword, and the chronomancers and technomancers are just better options. Now thankfully the destroyers have been given a points decrease, so we'll be seeing more of those pop up. I mean, I've definitely been popping them into my list lately. Not sure this one should be 2 command points though, it's a little bit too expensive for me. Fractal Targeting for 1 command point, using the shooting phase with the Tomb Blade unit, and until the end of the phase, all rapid fire weapons will be treated as assault weapons, so effectively they can now advance and then still fire at a -1 to hit penalty. But then the second one kind of nullifies that, you don't have any -1 to hit penalties. So what this basically means is you can advance and fire your weapons as normal. So you're giving more speed to these speed demons, but now you've given up your double tapping rapid fire shots, because now each one is only firing 2 shots instead of that potential 4 with the twin Gauss blasters. Now as these bikes already move 14 inches, I don't really feel it's necessary to use, and giving up so much firepower as well. However, there will be times in the game where you want to be contesting an objective that's a little bit out of reach, or scoring line breaker perhaps. It could be crucial, especially when you've still got a little bit of firepower. Judgment of the Triarch is next. It's one command point used on a Triarch unit in the shooting phase or the fight phase, and they're going to get a +1 to their hit roll. So Triarch Praetorians will be hitting on 2s for either of those phases, which is really handy. Now admittedly I don't really use Praetorians that often, but I can see the benefits of that. You can also use it on a Triarch Stalker 2 to be hitting on 2s. Now both of these units don't have too much in terms of buffs other than the Silent King, so it's nice to have this one up your sleeve if you're using either of these units. Malevolent Arking for 1 command point, used on a Necron unit that's using Tesla weapons. After making their attacks, you're going to roll 1d6 for any unit within 6 inches of the enemy unit, and on a 4+, that unit will suffer a mortal wound. So this one's a bit situational. Tesla is okay, but against more elite factions I just prefer the Gorse weapons for the AP. Even though mathematically the Tesla is better at full range, I just get frustrated when the Tesla bounces off Death Guard Terminator armor. This stratagem works hand in hand with the notion that factions with the poor armor saves tend to work in a numbers game and clump together for more board control. So for example Orcs or Tyranids, so finding units within 6 inches of that given unit is pretty easy. The only downside is it's not really that valuable when you're removing a single Orc boy for a command point. Okay, moving on, you got the Relentless Onslaught for 1 command point, used on a core infantry unit in the shooting phase. When they're using a rapid fire weapon, any unmodified hit roll of a 6 will score an additional hit. So again, I'm thinking of a max unit of warriors here, as they've got a lot of shots. Immortals will work for this, but you're limited to how many 6s you can actually achieve. Now the stratagem and the Disintegrator Capacitor stratagem, although they don't stack, they actually do combo it quite nicely for a lot of firepower. Getting 7 extra hits on average and also 7 auto wounding on average is pretty good. Solar Pulse for 1 command point, used on a Necron units that are using a ranged attack, and effectively you're removing the benefits of cover against the attack. Now I don't think I've ever utilised this one, maybe I could use it a little bit more I guess, but what's interesting about this stratagem is that some units gain buffs and abilities for being in cover, so by removing the cover you're also removing those additional buffs. And remember, this isn't just light cover, this also could be dense cover, so you'll be removing that -1 to hit due to the terrain feature, so potentially this one is a very underrated stratagem. Next you've got Techno-Oracular Targeting for 1 command point. In the shooting phase, before making a wound roll for an attack made by a Necron's model within your army, do not roll for the attack, it auto wounds. So I'm not really keen on this one. The only times I'd really consider using this stratagem is when firing a weapon with a high strength, so the problem with it is that it's very likely going to be wounding anyway. But you do remove the risk factor I guess, but you do also have command rerolls, but it also does have a bit of a risk to that. So this one's best used on the Chronomancer's Entropic Lance, or maybe in Illumina Zares' Eldritch Lance. Also, it's only working on a single die, so if you do have a few hits with that weapon, maybe roll the first one and see the result, as technically you can use the stratagem before making the wound roll of a single attack. So you can be a little bit tricksy with that, roll them one at a time just to see how you go. Okay, nothing of note from the charge phase, but there is one in the enemy charge phase, which is Enslaved Protectors. It's 1 command point, used on a Canoptic unit, and you're effectively giving them heroic intervention as if they were a character. So this one I do like. I frequently use Wraiths and Scarabs, and jumping either of those into a fight as a type of unit using the Scarabs, or just adding some extra strength 6 punch with the Canoptic Wraiths is always a handy tool. Okay, so let's move into the fight phase stratagems. You've got Disruption Fields for 1 command point, used on a core unit that is selected to fight, and you're going to be adding 1 to the strength characteristics of the model. Now this one's the most commonly used with the Lich Guards, in particular with the War Scythes, as it now gives them a strength 8 weapon without the -1 to hit penalty like the unwieldy weapons within the game, and strength 8, as you already know, means you're wounding toughness 4 models on 2s, which is quite a common toughness with a lot of infantry units within the game. Now even the Sword and Shield Lich Guards will go up to a strength 7 Hyperface Sword, which is pretty decent against vehicle models. You could also use this one on your warriors if they're stuck in a fight, as there's lots of attacks there and they'll be at strength 5, and if you're using the Novak code there'll be a -1 AP on top of that too. Entropic Strikers next is 2 command points, used on a Catan Shard in the fight phase, and you're removing invuln saves for your enemy models. Now the Nightbringer comes stock with this when using his strength 14 profile, but you could also use the stratagem and use his strength 7 profile if you're playing against weak units with an invuln save such as demons or gene stealers. The other 2 named Catan Shards will gladly take this when needed. Now it is 2 command points, but if you've got a Catan in combat with something worth a fair amount of points, it's best to just demolish it and move on as quickly as possible to find a new target, because you've only got 5 turns to get 350 points plus back, so don't forget it. On to the next one, which is Eternal Protectors, 1 command point used on a Lich Guard unit in the fight phase. Basically going to be giving them all an attack each if they're within 3 inches of a Dynasty Noble. So this one works nice with a Veil of Darkness relic on an Overlord model, because the My Will Be Done will give them a +1 to hit, so they're hitting on 2s with the My Will Be Done. Then they're going to get the extra attack with the Stratagem, and of course they're going to be guarding that Noble from range attacks too, because of their own ability. So a nice little simple combination there. Then add the Disruption Field Stratagem for Strength 8 War Signs as we just mentioned, then it's game on. The next one I do commonly use, which is the Self-Destruction Stratagem. It's 1 command point used on a Canoptic Scarab unit. Once you finish piling in, you can basically explode one of your Scarab. All you got to do is get a 2+ to explode to cause D3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 you actually just do a straight 3 mortal wounds, but then you lose the Scarab Swarm. Preferably you use this on a Scarab base that's already lost a few wounds already. Now I would highly recommend using a Canoptic Spider unit to be bringing these little guys back each turn. This one definitely works better against more elite armies, especially with a high toughness and a good save. Storm of Flensing Blades for 2 command points used on a Flayed Ones unit, and effectively they can fight again. First of all, got a problem with the fact that these are $50 for 5 models. Now I know we're not talking rules now, we're talking money here, and realistically you need a full unit of 20 of these guys to make good use of them. So who's actually paying $200 for a full unit of Flayed Ones? Because I'm certainly not. So Games Workshop needs to pull their finger out with that price in there. Now these guys should be troops in my opinion. They're virtually the same points as a warrior, and they're just giving up their range attacks for the melee attacks. Now I do like the Fight Against Stratagem though. It's 120 potential attacks at -1 AP, -2 AP if you're in the Novak code, and 6s against non-vehicle weapons and more hits. Thankfully they can deep strike, otherwise they'll be lost due to not being a core unit and only a movement of 5 inches. But yeah, if you do play Flayed Ones, I'd definitely be using this one. Okay, on to the miscellaneous stratagems now, which these kind of happen when you're taking damage within the game. So this could happen at any phase, any time. So the first one is Curse of the Pharaon. When a vehicle model from your army is destroyed, you don't need to roll to see if it explodes, it will just auto explode. So if it's a Titanic vehicle, it's going to be 3 command points. If it's not a Titanic, it'll just be 1 command point. Now I do like the auto explode, it's a great ace up your sleeve. When your Ghost Ark is surrounded by units of say Plague Marines, you pop the stratagem, and you just feel like you're getting a lot of points back just for doing so, and it's only a single command point as well on those regular vehicles as mentioned. Quantum Deflection is next, 1 command point, used on a Necron's vehicle that's got the Quantum Shielding ability, which is normally a 5+ invulnerable save, and it turns it into a 4+ invulnerable save. So whenever you see your vehicles in a bit of peril, this one's an easy pop, 1 command point to shrug off half the standard damage, and they need a 4+ to wound the model too because of the quantum shielding. Doesn't really need to be used every single turn though, only when you're really desperate to keep them afloat. Okay, Resurrection Protocol is the next as 1 command point. Use this when an infantry noble or an infantry cryptic model has been destroyed. Roll a d6. On a 4+, the model gets back up with d3 wounds remaining, but you can't use the stratagem on the same model within the game. Now I've used this a few times, it's mildly amusing to say the least, because I don't think I've ever failed a 4+ roll with this. Hopefully I haven't jinxed this run of good fortune. It simply keeps your buffs going, but what I love about this is it happens at the end of the phase. So the model is virtually protected almost. If you went down in the fight phase in particular, then you're virtually guaranteeing him to be alive in your own turn to use the buffs. So the Technomancers with the Rites of Reanimation, or the Chronomancers with the Chronometron ability, and of course the Infantry Overlords, named and unnamed. Next one is the Revenge of the Doomstalker. It's 2 command points, so a little bit pricey this one. When a Dynasty character has been destroyed by an enemy unit, you select your Doomstalker, then until the end of the phase, the Doomstalker can shoot as if it was its own shooting phase, but it can only target that enemy unit, and only if it's eligible to be targeted, and it's also a +1 to the hit roll, so they normally hit on 4s, it will now be hitting on 3s. Now unfortunately lately I've gone off using these kind of heavies with the blast ability, because as soon as they get tagged in combat, their fight is over. Now the +1 to the attached roll is usually irrelevant if you've got a Technomancer with the control node, giving that +1 buff to the Stalkers. Also, if your character was killed by another character, then the enemy character may have the Lookout Sir buff on him, which makes him non-targetable, plus the Doomstalker needs to not be within combat as well. I think it's a little bit too pricey for the command points, especially when it's got an unreliable amount of hits and damage. The penultimate one, which is Shadows of Drazak, which is 1 command point. This one's a Flayed Ones stratagem again. This one is simply a -1 to hit your Flayed Ones with enemy models. Never really used it if I'm honest, I just think Flayed Ones inevitably die anyway. Would be nice if they could reroll 1s to reanimate perhaps. Then the final one here, we've got Whirling Onslaught, 1 command point, used with the Scorpit Destroyers or the Scorpit Lord, and if they're selected as a target, you're going to be a -1 to their wound roll. Now Scorpit Destroyers are god tier in my opinion in terms of melee units, but it's just getting them into combat, which is a little bit of an annoyance. Yes, they move fast at 8 inches, but they get targeted pretty fast as well, which is where the stratagem comes in. Now a -1 to wound is bigger than you may think, because they've already got toughness 5 already, so this almost gives them a toughness 9 when you think about it, because strength 4 now wounds on 6s, Strength 5 now wounds on 5s, Strength 6 all the way up to Strength 9 wounds on 4s. So yeah, it effectively gives them a toughness 9 when they're being targeted. So I'm always using this if I'm running a Scorpion Destroyer unit as an auto include. So guys, that's the stratagems covered on the channel, which was voted on by yourselves. So thanks to each and every one of you that did vote. Please make sure you're subbing below, otherwise a Nightbringer will most definitely haunt you in your sleep. Just kidding guys, drop a like on your exits. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time.